Welcome into Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we tend to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, or they put a big pile of propaganda and smoke around it. We're going to cut through a lot of big stories today. A couple of big NATO stories as it relates to Putin and it relates to China. NATO agitating for nuclear war, it seems, wanting to place long-range weapons into Germany and other parts of Europe aimed directly at Russia. Russia firing back today on this. Guys, I think it's like people are ignoring this story. Putin is not. We could be literally slipping right into World War III and nuclear war unless somebody has a cooler head about all of it.
I mean, it's wild right now in Washington. They're sitting there celebrating one another. Hey, 75th anniversary of NATO. Welcome, everybody. We're the good guys. Also, here's a slip of paper that says we are nuclear power. And
we're suddenly now a nuclear power. Like, when the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, just a few minutes ago, Zelensky speaking out, basically, Vladimir Zelensky speaking out on Biden's health and mental fitness and says, yeah, we're all looking forward to November. So even Zelensky is throwing Biden under the bus. I guess Zelensky is like, the Netanyahu right now. I guess he's an unelected leader that can help us all, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, can't wait.
But we're going to talk about that because today is Biden's big boy press conference. Yes, that is happening today at 5:30 Eastern time. So just a short time from now. Just a little over an hour from now. This is his big NATO press conference. Going to be fielding a ton of questions from the press. We're going to know almost immediately how this thing unfolds, whether or not they're going to be throwing him softball questions, whether they're going to be throwing him tough questions,
whether they've given him a steroid,
right, or whether they've given him questions ahead of time.
Yes.
So we're going to be seeing that coming up here just in about an hour from now. But a lot of big developments around President Biden. I saw someone in the chat just saying, does anyone know what's about to happen on July 15th? They're hearing a lot of rumblings about July 15th as a big event. Yeah, stay tuned. We'll talk about July 15th in just a moment coming up here on the show.
Also, we're going to talk about Pfizer betting big on a weight loss drug. This is a pill. This is one of the same trials that they canceled last year because they were having so many adverse events. But hey, they're saying the new one has encouraging results. We're going to take a look at what they're telling us and what they are not, which is a lot.
And journalist Max Jones is going to be joining us today for the first time here on the show. He's done some great journalism on the WHO's pandemic marketplace. A lot of these big pharma companies right now are on a profit cliff. They're like, these profit cliffs are this is about to fall right off a profit cliff for a lot of these big pharma companies. And guess what? They have a plan. Why don't we create a permanent pandemic marketplace so that we're permanently in a pandemic and we don't have to get normal trials in place for testing? We can do this with we can do this with without testing. We can do this without clinical trials,
FDA approval. I mean, basically,
use.
That's where we are right now. We showed you a chart about 6 months ago of all of the pharmaceuticals that were approved last year with either fast track, emergency use authorization. I mean, basically everything that comes to market now has been some part of the trial process skipped.
Yeah.
That's just, why do it? Why do trials, right? We ignore the data anyway.
So let us know. That's going to be part of the show today. We got a lot to talk about on this Thursday. So thank you. Welcome in, everyone. Hopefully you subscribe to the show. This is a free show that we put on for you. Our team works really hard here. This is totally free to subscribe. I know YouTube changed their thing. People get scared when you click subscribe. You're not paying anything. And same on Rumble. I think it's follow on Rumble. So you can do that there. And it's the same thing on X as well. So please subscribe, follow, do all of those things. And let us know where you're joining us from. I saw someone in the chat just said, hello from Las Vegas. Hello from Las Vegas. Good to see all of you guys. Let us know.
Where it's melting. Yeah, stay inside and watch Redacted.
Smokes. It's so
like 120 degrees there.
It's so stinking hot right now outside. We got a heat wave hitting us right here. So hopefully you guys are staying. Kids want to go to the pool in a little bit after the show, which we will do. All right, we got a lot of news to get to today, but first, I know we talk a lot about gold on this show. We absolutely talk about gold, but silver is also a fantastic investment. Our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up investing in silver because it's so darn cheap compared to gold right now. And it's a commodity. It is a precious metal. It is a currency. It is a commodity. We are big investors in silver. And it's really, to me, as Kevin Demerit from Lear Capital likes to say, it's really the best kept secret right now in investing is silver. $30 for an ounce of silver compared to other prices on investments right now. And it's an industrial metal. It's in everything from cell phones to batteries, electronics, solar, electric cars, the medical industry, all of it. So right now, if you want to get set up investing in silver, our friends over at Lear Capital can help you do that. And they can give you a free silver guide. They have a free silver shortage report because we don't have enough of it. We don't have enough right now of silver. And all you need to do is call our 800 number, 1-800-613-3557 to get your free guide, or go to learredacted.com and they'll give you the free silver guide there as well. So again, that's learredacted.com, or call our 800 number, 1-800-613-3557 to get investing in silver today.
Well, NATO is pushing for nuclear war with Russia and China, it seems. Pretty much any takers that will play nuclear roulette with us. That's what NATO wants. They are selling it to us as peace, though. I'm going to show you the documents that NATO released this week at the summit. And as you look at this, tell me that this does not seem like dystopic fiction, but it's real. This is our reality. So let's take a look. This, my friends, is what we were warned about by George Orwell. Here is the declaration that NATO published for their 75th anniversary meeting in Washington, D.C. The declaration has strong language about Russia, China, and nuclear weapons. And in response, take a look at what Russia says. Okay, you're going to do this? We are considering changing our nuclear doctrine then. What are Russia specifically and China responding to? Well, they're responding to this. This is part of the doctrine I just showed you. And this is NATO specifically saying now, we are a nuclear alliance. This sentence that I highlighted for you stopped me in my tracks today. This is NATO saying this. As long as nuclear weapons exist, NATO will remain a nuclear alliance. Is that chilling to you? That means every NATO member is eligible to have and may already have, or else they will have, nukes on their territory. That's a mic drop, right?
Yeah, and we can put shorter range nuclear weapons into Poland. We can put them all throughout. We can put them in Germany if we want to, all aimed direct. So think about this if the shoe were on the other foot, right? The Monroe Doctrine of having nuclear weapons or any sort of offensive weapons inside of the Western Hemisphere, i.e. the Cuban Missile Crisis. We can hold up our Monroe Doctrine and tell you, no, we don't allow that inside, near the United States in the Western Hemisphere. We wouldn't stand for it.
Yes. No, clearly not. But they're saying any NATO member, including Ukraine, Finland, and Sweden, you get that too. I mean, I wonder how you feel about that if you're from Finland or Sweden. Your leaders have applied to join NATO, and that means you get nukes inside your territory. Does that feel awesome? Did you want that?
What would happen if it went the other way? If all the BRICS nations got together and said, you know what, we're going to form the same alliance. So Cuba, Saudi Arabia, all these other countries, they're like, well, now we're going to have nukes as well.
Right. Well, that's the world that we're setting ourselves up for.
I mean, and that's frankly what has started to unfold with BRICS. It's, not just a financial alliance. It's starting to become a security alliance.
Well, today, actually, Putin said that BRICS should, or consider, I suppose, is the language he used, becoming a parliamentary organization, which would mean what? Something like the European Union? Okay. So again, that's unfolding before our very eyes. So we're seeing clear delineation of the world, East versus West, with nuclear weapons and opposing laws. We're not heading towards a peaceful world, you guys.
Well, Chico Kid 530 in our Rumble chat says, remember, Ukraine is not a NATO member yet. And of course, we've heard over the past 24 hours, Ukraine's ascension to NATO is all but certain to happen.
Right. We'll call them nuclear or NATO juniors, like they're the junior league being called up, or at least the promise of such. But because of the application and because NATO is now saying they are full on a nuclear force, well, then anyone who's an ally, right, could hold nuclear weapons. Now, we're going to talk in a second about bioweapons because Ukraine does hold Western bioweapons. So it's not that much of a step further. Why are we already putting bioweapons in Ukraine? You wouldn't see that it's much more of a line to put nuclear weapons. So again, yep.
And I just want to point also that our currencies have become a weapon these days too. I mean, we use the dollar. The dollar's been weaponized for sanctions and stuff. So it's like, they consider that, like, if they use something other than the dollar, that's a potential, weapon used against us. So they'd be like, oh, well, we can justify using other means now.
Right. Now, this phrase that I just showed you, as long as nuclear weapons exist, NATO is a nuclear country. Is there a way to put that horse back in the barn? Let me know what you think of that. Now, here is why they lay out that these threats mean that NATO has to be nuclear. I've highlighted the countries that they're telling us are the problems. They are the familiar groups: Iran, the People's Republic of China, and Russia. They said that NATO countries are confronted by hybrid cyber, space, and other threats and malicious activities from state and non-state actors. Anything stand out to you there, boys? Anything?
China.
I like the China, yeah, but also I always find it funny when they're like Iran's destabilizing actions juxtaposed. I'm not even going to try to say that word again. And compared to like the U.S., who is stabilizing where? What like,
yes.
That's kind of, are we just upset that's
all we do.
That they're stepping on our territory?
Right.
It's all we do is stabilize the world. Everywhere we go, the United States stabilizes the world.
Yes. Ask Panama how much we did that for
the United
them.
States is like when people fold up those napkins and they shove them under a wobbly table. Like that's what we do. Mm-hmm. You know, like when you're at a Chick-fil-A, just fold up some napkins, shove them under a table. That's what the United States is. We stabilize the world.
I want to look at the chat and see if anybody else saw what I saw there. Space. You guys, when did NATO say they're going into space? That's new.
Well, of course, that's when we created the Space Force, right?
No, that's American, right? Yes, America has been upping the rhetoric around space wars. But since when did NATO get involved? This is new to me. Take a look at this next slide. It said they are going to accelerate space. The integration of space into planning, exercises, and multi-domain operations with NATO's Space Operations Center. The third one down there, this is an LOL. They're going to strengthen the protection of critical undersea infrastructure, CUI. Well, that's funny because I remember a NATO country recently being the victim of a Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. That was Germany. So are they very interested in who blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline?
No.
No. Or are they just going to prevent further CUI events? Like, we don't want any more of that. I mean, they're not very big on finding that out, even though Germany is the victim of that. That's weird, right? And again, they're not really doing that now. They just said that they will. And then the last one, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense. Of course, whenever NATO says defense, we're going to read this as offense. These are the things they are doing, right? And biological weapons clearly are something NATO is going to be doing, but only for defense, right? Remember when Victoria Nuland said that to Congress? Yes, NATO countries do have biological weapons, but only for defense.
I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question. I am certain that the Russians were looking at their reserves as a way to buffer sanctions. Do you know how, now that we've sanctioned the central bank along with others, do we have an idea of what percentage of their reserves are frozen or inaccessible to them?
Virtually all of them are now frozen. You notice that the country's been under currency controls for almost 2 weeks now, and the whole point of putting so many of these top 10 banks under sanctions is to make it impossible for them to get access to their cash in hard currency.
Okay, so that one doesn't hold up, right?
Just enjoying some of the chat room today about Victoria Nuland, that she's Satan's wife, that she causes erectile dysfunction.
Okay. You know how I feel about hag baiting Victoria Nuland. She is odious enough in and of herself.
She is she's walking Satan.
Right. Okay. So again, those 46 U.S. biolabs in Ukraine were only defensive. So now every NATO country will have defensive chemical and biological weapons labs.
Great.
Got that?
Great.
Yeah.
And what happened to the ones that were already there? That Russia was warning us about? We called it propaganda, Russian propaganda, and then it was confirmed
that they were there. Well, a lot of them are in the Donbas region, which are now under control of the Russians. So we don't get to know. All we get to know is this document that I just showed you said that NATO is investing in chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense. Again, when I see defense, I read offense. NATO's working on these things, but they say because they are a peaceful organization.
Well, and this is something that's I've never been able to wrap my head around. So if you have nuclear weapons, that's like the ultimate deterrent. Why the hell do you still need to make biological weapons? Because, I mean, you still have the same, like, if you use chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons on you, we will nuke you. It works that way for everything. Why does it have to be a tit for tat? It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's like when you raid the spider and then you hit it with a shoe. You got to come back in and make double sure, You spray it with a mustard gas. Right. And then you also... it's still kind of twitching, and then let's just drop a nuke on it. Right. I think that raid spider analogy is exactly what NATO is hoping to do. You got it? I think that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. All right. So interesting. And now as for China, this is how they figure that China is responsible for the war in Ukraine. They're saying that the PRC, the People's Republic of China, has to uphold their principles of the UN Charter. And they are responsible because they transfer dual use materials such as weapons, components, equipments, and raw material that serve as inputs for Russia's defense sector. They say China cannot enable the largest war in Europe. Hilarious that it's China enabling the longest war in Europe in recent history without the negatively impacting its interest and reputation. So by that logic, right? Okay. The United States is enabling the war in Ukraine. I don't see it any other way. But okay, by this logic, the United States is enabling the war on Gaza, if that's what we're doing. So is this okay? At least 27 people have been killed and 53 people injured in the reported strike at a school in Gaza that was sheltering civilians. And it has been reported that those missiles came from the United States. So by this logic, right, it can't be a double standard. China provides weaponry and they are responsible, but we are not for wherever our bullets and weapons and missiles go? Clearly not. That's a double standard. I guess that's okay, but China should be held responsible for its ties with Russia because we lie about the reason for the war in Ukraine. Here's what China says about that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's just the difference of the United States does it for good. China does it for bad. We have to remember that.
For profit.
Everything the United States does, we do it for the good of the world.
We're stabilizing.
Sure.
We're stabilizing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Here's China's response to that. A spokesperson said that this is biased, slanderous, and provocative, and called NATO a relic of the Cold War. Here's what a spokesperson said: that without any evidence, NATO continues to spread falsehood fabricated by the U.S. So they know who's behind it, who's writing the press releases. It's the United States. Openly smearing China, sowing discord between China and Europe, and undermining China-European cooperation. They say that China's EU mission countered NATO's accusations by warning the alliance to stay out of Asia, which it said was not a wrestling ground for geopolitical competition. Here they say NATO should not become the disruptor of peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific or a tool used by certain great powers to maintain hegemony. So if you think that NATO is speaking the language of a peaceful and defensive organization, you're not listening, clearly. And we have leaders of these member states that just continue to turn up the volume with every passing day. Germany's like, Sure, nuclear war. We're pretty close to Russia, but we'll play this game. Take a look at this from Der Spiegel today, saying the West must clearly clarify whether it is ready for war against Putin. The German people are really not being involved in this decision. Their leaders are letting it happen anyway because the United States has announced that it will deploy previously banned nuclear-capable missiles to Germany. That's just going to happen, you guys, because we threw this big party, this big 75th anniversary NATO event. We just keep making these war decisions. Like, yay, party, 75th anniversary NATO. We're shipping fighters
F-16s.
to
who's making that decision? That was something President Biden said would not happen. But because he's out to lunch and demented, who's actually running the country?
It's just happening under the guise of this party. It's wild. Friend of the show, Ralph Schulheimer, said this on X today, that the difference between now and the Cold War is that back then, everyone involved understood that a direct confrontation between NATO and the Soviet Union has to be avoided. We didn't want that. Whatever your take is, but to ignore the risks of war between nuclear powers is just insane. Absolutely true. We only have insane people going along with this. But RFK Jr. said this on X today, and it was at least a bit of a cooling salve. He says that NATO was founded as a defensive alliance to protect Western Europe from the Soviet Union. When the Berlin Wall fell, George Bush should have gone to Berlin and announced mission accomplished. Instead, NATO morphed into an expansionist, offensive alliance, provoking war instead of preserving peace and keeping the dollar flowing to the military contractors. As president, I won't disband NATO. I will transform NATO into a true peace alliance dedicated to global disarmament. Now, I like, if we could keep this up on the screen, I like everything he says there, but I don't think the last two sentences are really, or the last sentence, the last two. How are you going to do that? You don't disband NATO, but transform it? I mean, that's like making the dark side the good side.
You got to throw it out. You got to, as Colonel McGregor has said on our show multiple times, it's going to die. It needs to collapse. And so I don't think that you can transform it. You have to get rid of everyone in this organization.
Look here, Darth Vader.
Put the genie back in the bottle.
You're the good side now. Right.
Yeah. I think it's impossible. Viktor Orban today said the same thing. NATO needs to go back to its roots as a peaceful organization. Right?
Yeah.
But it's not. And you have two NATO members now are standing up and saying absolutely not. No weapons going to these regions. So some members of NATO are saying, don't do this craziness. Don't be sending these long-range weapons into Germany, these Tomahawk cruise missiles and other spots. So at least there are some cooler heads still in NATO, like Viktor Orban, but that's about it.
But it's happening under the guise of pomp and circumstance. That's the thing that's so upsetting, is all of these parades and speeches. And it's like, and here you go. Here's a bunch of warmongering that's real nukes in your country.
That's like taking one of the medieval torture chambers and turning it into like a lounge with all the spike weapons and everything.
Right.
Yeah, this used to be where people would be stretched and their feet would be tied and bound, but now it's a pedicure chair. So I hope you enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, let us know what you think of this. If you see any silver lining to the NATO 75th anniversary summit that we do not see, I find it terrifying, but maybe you're having a good time at the parties and you like all the speeches and the flags and the cocktails. So let me know what you think. We have a lot more news to get to because around this 75th anniversary event, President Biden will be hosting a big boy press conference. This is something they're saying to prove to us that he is the adult in the room, not the geriatric in the room. So we're going to talk about how that is being received, what we are looking for. Also, we're going to talk about Pfizer because they are moving ahead with a weight loss drug that's not an injectable, but a pill. After last year, they canceled their trials because people were getting permanent diarrhea. Sorry, hope you weren't eating there. So we're going to talk about all of that and more. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at American Financing, because you know that the economy is awful. Inflationary numbers came in today, and the Fed is celebrating that it's just 3%. I mean, last month it was 3.3%, so this is better. Prices are still going up, but by a lower number. Okay, but where does that leave us as American families? Grocery bills are high, expenses are high. So if you are struggling to make ends meet, you could look into your home equity as a way to tap into money that you already have in order to lower your monthly expenses. American Financing can help you break this cycle, and they're saving people like you an average of over $800 a month. So think about that, what you could do with you lowering your monthly expenses by $800 a month. It's just something that you have to look into and learn. It's a new financial product because you may have money that's yours sitting in your house and you can do better with it. So give them a call at 866-890-8434 or head on over to americanfinancing.net/redacted. Doesn't hurt, just doesn't cost anything to take a look. See if this will work for your family and your assets. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/redacted.
And thanks to all of you for subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it. Good to see the 30,000 of you across all of our platforms, Rumble, YouTube, X, BitChute, all of the different platforms we publish on a regular basis. Good to see all of you guys. So thank you guys for subscribing and being a part of our show here. I appreciate it. All right. Well, today, folks, is the big day. That's right. It's a huge big boy press conference today for President Biden at 5:30 Eastern time. So that's coming up here in just about an hour from now. Today is the final nail in his coffin. A few hours ago, senators held a private lunch with President Biden about his future. And all of this is theater. All of this is being done on purpose, orchestrated by President Obama. Even MSNBC is acknowledging this. Watch.
Say one thing that we do have to underline here, just so viewers can follow what's going on behind the scenes, is the Biden campaign and many Democratic officials do believe that Barack Obama is quietly working behind the scenes to orchestrate this.
Yeah, not very quietly, actually. He's been orchestrating this from the very beginning, and everyone knows it. So you literally have MSNBC admitting what we've all known for quite a while. Biden's staff are pushing Biden out there one last time in front of the cameras to answer the big boy questions. And it's not us calling it the big boy press conference. It's his staff that has been hyping this up, this big boy angle now for the last week or so.
Big boy press conference. Big boy press conference. A big boy press conference. Hold a press conference. A big boy press conference. A press conference. I guess a big boy press conference is what we're calling it. The press conference. The big boy press conference. Y'all are planning to have. Gives his press conference. His big boy press conference.
Yeah. So just think about that for a second. They're all on the same page with this big boy press conference moniker, right? Someone worked this up in some sort of a meeting to put this out there, and they're letting everyone know that their president, we're going to have this big boy moment. So they workshopped this phrase, and they passed it around as part of their meeting notes. Yeah, and they're making sure that everyone's on the same page to say this when they go out in front of a microphone. It's amazing,
and it's like tongue-in-cheek infantilizing him. It's like you don't call an adult a big boy unless they're being like the opposite. That's just not something you do.
Right.
Unless they're in on the joke.
Come here,
right?
big boy. Like, we're going to change your diaper now.
Yeah.
Right? That's exactly what this is. So get ready for it, folks. The press conference will be used to justify his removal from office, and you'll be able to tell how this press conference goes within the first few minutes, I believe. I mean, will the press launch tough questions of the president or give him softball questions about Project 2025 or Putin's election interference or other crap like that? Will the media or Jim Acosta from CNN ask questions like this?
Hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion. Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN. All right. And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better. If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried? That's enough. That's enough. Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks. That's enough. Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President, that's enough. Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have? I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic, Mr. President.
So will we see tough questions like that? Put down the mic. You're done. You're done. I mean, do you think anyone's going to stand up to President Biden like that today? We'll see. We'll see. I hope that the press corps actually asks tough questions, even if they are ridiculous, like the Russian hoax investigation. Go ahead, David.
If I was in the press corps for Biden, I would have a fully equipped ice cream cone and hand it to him and then ask all my questions.
So you can just
I got you an ice cream cone here, and I have some.
That's what big boys like. Yeah,
Yep.
or Slim Jim.
So if you start seeing a lot of Project 2025 questions, then you know how it will go. They'll be trying to save Biden, giving him some softball questions, teeing him up to just slam President Trump. Overnight, some of the media all got together and ran headlines saying Putin is trying to push Biden out once again. I mean, it's unbelievable. Russia aims to undermine Biden in November election, intel officials say. Russia interfering in 2024 election to help Trump, U.S. intelligence officials say. I mean, they're all like they're scrambling right now. It's Russia's fault again. Can you believe it? Didn't happen before, but now it's happening again. It's all over again. So they are confused right now.
Well, we gave them the idea. I mean, we debunked that. The FBI debunked that, that Russia had interfered in the Trump election. But okay, now they think that was a good idea.
But they're saying they're doing it again. But wait a minute, the FBI already debunked it. So how are they doing it again? It was false from the beginning.
Right.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say, didn't Putin in his interview with Tucker say he actually wanted Biden? Like,
yeah, I think he actually said he preferred Biden. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't recall that, but
yeah,
okay.
It was an interesting moment. Anyway, it's Russia's fault again. So they are confused right now. They're flailing around in the wind. It's either Putin or Trump is trying to bring down the country with Project 2025, like Congressman Eric Swalwell tried to do yesterday with Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro, asking him about Project 2025. Now, I'm no fan of Ben Shapiro at all, but this was a brutal response to trying to use this Project 2025 canard.
I just wanted to know, from your perspective, I think it would help us understand on just like a scale of 0 to 100%, how much do you support Project 2025?
I think like President Trump, I haven't looked all that deeply at Project 2025, but it seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
And so...
Yeah. So they're grasping at Russia. They're grasping at Project 2025. They're grasping at Trump is going to become a dictator when he takes office on day one. He's going to have ICE agents rounding up all these illegal immigrants and sending them back to their countries. What's wrong with that? Please tell me. But it doesn't matter right now. It's over for Biden. And sources I've spoken to believe Biden will likely step down and turn over the presidency to Kamala Harris next week during the Republican National Convention. Earlier, before the show started, I saw some people saying, I've been hearing a lot of rumblings about July 15th. What is July 15th? July 15th, of course, is the first day of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's also a convenient day when all of the press corps and all of the press coverage and all of the media organizations are going to be in Milwaukee covering the RNC, right? They're going to be there glad-handing, talking with all the different Republican candidates and senators and delegates and all of that stuff. And then suddenly a bombshell will be dropped that, guess what? Kamala Harris is now the Democratic nominee for the presidency and will assume the presidency. President Biden will resign. Can you imagine? All of that press coverage will be on Kamala Harris. Way to take out the air in the room of the Republican National Convention. Way to deflate the President Trump balloon. July 15th, July 16th, right before President Trump gives his final speech, his big RNC acceptance speech on Thursday of next week. When is this going to happen? Clearly, they would love to suck all of the oxygen out of the room of the Republican National Convention. They would absolutely love to elevate Kamala Harris to that position. And it sets the stage then for the DNC in August in Chicago. President Obama speaking at the DNC, on stage electrifying the Democratic base, introducing Kamala Harris as the first woman president to take the stage. You see it all coming together, don't you? This is how you can electrify the base once again. This is how you could hope to try to beat President Trump, take the wind out from his sails at the RNC, electrify the DNC with an Obama, Kamala Harris, stage presence, Michelle Obama, push old senior Joe Biden to the cheap
It's not
seats.
that they would switch, right? That Biden would become the VP again.
Oh, he would
just
be VP.
Drop out.
He would resign. He would be gone. And
right.
So you'd have that as position.
So who would be her VP pick?
That's the question.
Just
right?
as terrifying.
Right. That's the real terrifying question. Would it be Michelle Obama, who's very publicly said she wouldn't be interested in it? But come on. This has been orchestrated by President Obama for a long time now. And would it be Gavin Newsom in that spot, or would it be Michelle Obama? It's hard to say. But we'll see. New York Times is reporting this morning that, yes, the Biden administration is, in fact, already quietly testing Kamala Harris versus Trump. So the Biden campaign, its own staff, called the New York Times to let them know about this. The only way the New York Times finds out that internally the Biden administration is running its own polling is if the Biden administration calls the New York Times and tells them, hey, this is what we're doing. Please print this story. We want this out there. We want people to know that we're already really floating the idea of Kamala Harris. And today she's being sent to Greensboro, North Carolina this afternoon to rally black voters and outline what she says is former Trump would do in a second term. So she's going to Greensboro, North Carolina this afternoon. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, and it's no coincidence that we didn't see her for the longest time during Biden's presidency, and all of a sudden now she's out everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the polling, the shock polling that we showed you on Tuesday, right? There's a shock poll that shows that she would beat President Trump. Really? Well, that's a shocking poll that just came out of nowhere all of a sudden. Very convenient. Axios reports, overnight there have been a couple of really odd developments, though. So Axios is all over this. Scoop, Biden poised to face deluge of fresh calls to drop out from Democratic members of Congress, Democratic senators. Axios also reporting the number of new Democrats today. Separately, both pundits, delegates, and donors are calling on Biden to drop out. Overnight, also Axios reporting Senator Chuck Schumer wants Biden to drop out. This was a bombshell. Then his office later said, no, we support Biden. But of course, this was already in the works. This is how it happens. You drop this bombshell, then you kind of walk it back. The damage is already done. You mean the Senate majority leader doesn't want President Biden to be in power anymore? Nancy Pelosi also is now being considered to be the hammer and hatchet to go out and also continue this and to try to get him to fall to back off and become to be put out to pasture. But the biggest bombshell came from actor George Clooney. Now, some of you watching may be shocked to learn that President Biden has dementia. I know some of you might be shocked to just learn that. Maybe not fit to lead the country. The stunning revelation has apparently just hit George Clooney and just hit Hollywood and some Democratic donors who just had no idea.
This is brand new information.
No idea. They just didn't know. I know it might be shocking to learn this. Other Democrats, of course, many of whom were at this massive George Clooney fundraiser 3 weeks ago, where you had Julia Roberts, you had President Barack Obama, you had George Clooney, you had Jack Black coming out in his
Jimmy Kimmel
suspenders. Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel.
All the cool kids.
They raised $30 million for this event, where the puppet master Barack Obama was pulling the strings the entire time at this event. Now, of course, there's calls to have this money returned to the donors, because then George Clooney yesterday published this opinion piece in the New York Times. I love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee, writes George Clooney.
Now, this should be enough to make it so that you never give money to anything George Clooney says ever again. Because he asked for a $10,000 steak dinner. People showed up to raise money for Joe Biden, only 3 weeks later to say, actually, we shouldn't be supporting Joe Biden. Why would you wouldn't you be so pissed off that you plunked down the money for that and then the host goes and reneges the cause?
I mean, we all knew, and so did he. That's the great, injustice here.
Yes, that's obvious, right? But this is your credibility, dude. You just noticed this in the last 3 weeks and you asked people to spend a ton of money to go?
I mean, you basically ended your career with this by doing this.
You think George Clooney ended his career with this?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like you're going to have a huge backlash against people saying we're not going to go to a movie of this guy. We're not going to. I think a lot of people probably on the left feel probably quite slighted by this. I would think there's calls today for the money to be returned. The $30 million they raised.
FOP stocks are going to crash.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess you guys, if you've seen Bro Brother Where Art Thou, he was a FOP guy for his hair.
Stuff.
That's not a Dapper Dan man. No.
So now Clooney has written an opinion piece in the New York Times, which they allowed him to publish, saying it's time for Biden to step down. And here's how Dana Bash put it.
If President Biden does withdraw from the race, replacing him at the top of the ticket could be chaotic. But here's what a top Biden fundraiser and longtime supporter, George Clooney, said about that in his op-ed this morning. Would it be messy? Yes, democracy is messy, but would it enliven our party and wake up voters who, long before the June debate, had already checked out? It sure would. The short ramp to Election Day would be a benefit for us, not a danger. John.
Yeah. So why now? You mean to tell me all of the people in the room didn't know? They didn't know? They apparently, and according to the Wall Street Journal, the moment that everyone was shocked by is that, there was the music, the pomp and circumstance, Jack Black, President Barack Obama comes out, and then, President Biden walks out to big applause. Then they sit down and do this Q&A session with Jimmy Kimmel, and President Obama is sort of sitting there as his buffer. And when he couldn't really answer questions at all, the crowd started to turn and look at each other. Really? We didn't know about this? This is what David Axelrod, an Obamaite, and John Favreau from the Pod Save America podcast, also an Obamaite, an Obama bro. They both were on CNN making the point that this was a disaster and it's time to go. Watch.
About the piece, Dana, that I thought was particularly impactful was Clooney, who just hosted a major fundraiser for the president a few weeks ago in California, said you can't win the battle against time. None of us can. It's devastating to say, but Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago, the fundraiser was not the Joe Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. That is devastating. That's devastating.
Yeah, and
and it's what people fear.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to ask John about, because, John, you were at that fundraiser as well. I don't know if you spent as much time with President Biden as George Clooney did, since he was one of the hosts. But I'm totally with you, David. That quote was like, wow.
I mean, it was not surprising to any of us who were at the fundraiser. I was there. Clooney was exactly right. And every single person I talked to at the fundraiser thought the same thing, except for the people working for Joe Biden, or at least they didn't say that. But I remember my wife, Emily, turned to me after the fundraiser and said, what are we going to do? And I said, well, there's a debate in a week. Either he'll do well in the debate and we'll think, well, he was just tired because he flew all the way back from Europe and that'll be that. Or he'll be like this at the debate and then the whole country will be talking about it. And so here we are.
We just had no idea.
Here we are.
We just had no idea.
How'd we get here?
All these Obama people are now coming out on television. David Axelrod, John Favreau, all these people. And we have, by the way, we have exclusive footage of George Clooney executing his plan now to remove President Biden. Look at this. We got this in just a few minutes ago.
Oh, who did this? That's bad.
Well, that's what's happening. So
it's a metaphor, okay?
Yes.
Nobody heard the president.
No one heard the metaphorically,
right.
Yes. So yeah, just a few. What is it? The press conference starts in about 40 minutes or so from now, and I got to say, it's going to be an unbelievable moment. And you have Vladimir Zelensky from Ukraine is in town trying to get some more money to continue that war, which will leave Ukraine totally dead and decimated. And he admitted that they're all concerned about President Biden. So Zelensky, in town asking for more money, is also crapping all over the president of the United States, telling everyone, we're all anxious and waiting for November.
I mean, the pylon is embarrassing. The good news is he doesn't know.
He has no idea.
He doesn't get it.
No, he's going to be pushed out there in front of this press conference. That's really the sad part about all of this, is that here you have a guy who has clearly, arguably, allegedly Parkinson's and definitely dementia. That's been confirmed by his family. And Tucker Carlson confirmed that. So you have a demented person who allegedly has Parkinson's being shoved out into a press conference for theatrical purposes by President Obama and his staff, basically to be flayed by the media. This is the end moment here for President Biden.
Right.
We got more news to get to.
Like that, like the town in there's like that dementia town. I believe it's in I want to say like the Netherlands or Switzerland, where it's like an entire town that like everybody that works there just plays along with everybody's like internal fantasy so that they don't confuse the people. So people that think it's like 1950s, everybody acts like it is, and it's just like a treatment center. So maybe they'll set Biden up with like a fake Oval Office and just let him sit in there and be president all day and
press buttons,
just be unaware. Yeah, press button.
Here's a button. Here's a button where you can blow up Russia if you'd like. With this, press this button. It's just
if we do that, can we please send him with his staff? For example, Antony Blinken, Karine Jean-Pierre, John Kirby. Let them all go too. Make that their new job, so we don't have to deal with them.
Yeah,
all of his cabinet. Send them.
Kick
too.
all. I should mention cabinet. I'm glad you brought that up. Nate Silver today confirmed that Biden has not held a cabinet meeting, a full cabinet meeting, since October of 2023 with his cabinet.
What?
It's never happened before. This is unprecedented.
Wow.
And Nate Silver, not exactly a conservative, right? So this has never happened before. No cabinet meeting since October 2023. And what Nate Silver basically says is that they're inoculating him from his staff. Like there are people very close to him, like Jill Biden, keeping him away from anyone.
Yeah.
They're just keeping him like cloistered off from people right now. Really troubling. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We are going to be looking at Pfizer, because guess what? They have encouraging data for a new weight loss pill that you will have to take every day. Every day you'll have to take a new Pfizer pill. Wait till you hear what their testing has looked like and their trials on this. We'll talk about that in a moment. Plus, the World Health Organization has a plan to help Big Pharma, which is to create a permanent pandemic market. That's right. So, when all of these drugs are sort of going off a cliff right now, no one's really taking COVID vaccines anymore because the jig is up. Well, guess what? A lot of these big pharma companies are suffering profit cliffs right now, where they're going to be losing a lot of money. So the way to not lose money is to create a sort of a permanent pandemic marketplace. We'll talk about that in a second.
Sell bats there, like bat food? Is it a wet market?
It'll be a wet market. Yeah, you can go and buy some food. You can buy some cottage cheese and some bats. So we'll get to all of that and more. But first,
recently, Wall Street firms raised their year-end S&P 500 forecasts after the May 15th CPI data came out. So we could see a similar stock surge. Maybe, maybe not. Whether or not it actually happens, who knows? But having a reliable trading app as your tool is always a choice. And that is why I want to tell you about our friends over at MooMoo. They are today's sponsor. It's a one-stop global app that is available for users in the United States and Australia. Now, first of all, MooMoo offers some exciting bonuses for new users. They have a competitive 5.1% APY with a 3-month 3% APY booster for new U.S. accounts. Yes, that's right. That's 8.1% total. And you get that 3-month extra bonus. Now, if you create that account after May 29th, which, of course, it's already after May 29th, so you're good to go. They also can get 15 free stocks by depositing $1,000 and maintaining the balance for 60 days. Australians enjoy something similar as well. You get 6.8% P.A cash interest for 180 days. That's up to $3,353 for a cash balance of $100,000. Now, that's up to 10 free shares with eligible deposits as well, and maintaining that account balance for 30 days. So use my link down below to sign up and see more information about that. Besides that, MooMoo's financial earnings calendar features provided daily updates on economic data releases, including Federal Reserve rates, CPI information, unemployment rates, core PCE, and so much more, with an option for one-click subscriptions. And if you're not interested in any of that information, buy and trade stocks. It's that simple. So don't forget to use the link down below to sign up today. Get your new user reward from MooMoo when you start your investment journey with our sponsor MooMoo today. The link works for users in both regions, both the United States and Australia. So check it out today. Check out the link below for more information.
Pfizer says that they have encouraging data for a once-a-day weight loss pill, so they are going to move forward with developing this. This is Pfizer's answer to Ozempic. That's the weight loss injectable. You give it to yourself as a shot on a regular basis, and it helps you to lose weight. The problem with these drugs is so many, but the main thing is that they do not cure the underlying cause of obesity. They just make you thinner as long as you stay on them. Do they cure your obesity? No. The underlying condition persists. Do they have a pathway to get off them so that you improve? No, you have to stay on it forever. And now U.S. medical associations say that they are recommended for children as young as 12 years old. So what we're doing is looking to put young kids on this drug forever. That is what's happening on Ozempic. Pfizer really wants in on this game because Ozempic is so stinking profitable. Take a look at the forecast for sales for Ozempic if they stay on the market, and if is significant because Ozempic is facing a ton of litigation for all of the contraindications that it causes. People who have been on Ozempic say that it causes stomach paralysis and permanent diarrhea, terrible cramping. Novo Nordisk is currently fighting this in courts, many courts. Here's just one case that they're fighting. A woman in Louisiana is suing Ozempic maker Novo Nordisk, saying that she developed gastroparesis, which is a slowdown in the emptying of the stomach into the small intestine, and that led to vomiting and pain. Anything to lose weight, right? Now, Ozempic is known as a GLP-1 agonist drug, so it stimulates increased insulin secretion for healthy blood sugar levels. Pfizer's new pill is called danuglipron, and it too is a GLP-1. So as long as Ozempic stays on the market, again, that's a big if, it's slated to make $14 billion this year and $18 billion by 2029. So clearly, that's an attractive business market for all pharmaceutical companies. They're all trying to get in on this. And Pfizer now is saying, okay, we're making progress on this. Now, this is the same type of pill because Pfizer thinks, okay, people don't like shots, but these are successful weight loss drugs because people are on this expensive drug forever and they lose weight. So it's good for us, right? So they're saying if we can turn this shot into a pill, we're golden. Last year, they had to stop trials on one of their pills because all of these contraindications. But now they're saying, we got it. We think we got one. And they're going forward with this.
Morning, Joe. That's right. Pfizer is saying that they are advancing a once daily obesity pill into the next stage of development. Now, remember, last year they scrapped their twice daily formulation of this experimental pill, danuglipron, because the side effects were so intolerable. And so they went back to the drawing board and said, we'll go ahead and see if we can make a once daily formulation work. Now, today they're saying that they have found the right formulation and that later this year they're going to start studies to find the right dose. And then from there, that will inform exactly the rest of the development plan. Now, I spoke to Pfizer, and they are expecting the results from that dose selection study in the first quarter of next year. So this is still pretty early stage stuff, but still you're seeing shares of Pfizer up about 3.5% this morning.
So last year when they stopped trials, it was because patients said that they were having nausea, vomiting, and gastrointestinal side effects. That was when they were using the GLP-1 called lotiglipron. Now they're saying, we think we might have got it right with danuglipron. Well, again, that is taken once per day. And is it better in terms of safety? Well, all Pfizer tells us is that their trials have been encouraging. So here is their press release about it. We don't have any numbers. We don't know how many people were actually losing weight, who was sick, whether they did in fact have these terrible stomach pains, gas, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. We don't know. All they're saying is encouraging. Now, keep that in mind because it reminds me a lot like the Moderna vaccine that we reported last month in June. It was the COVID flu combination when Moderna said that the trials were acceptable. Here is that release for their, again, phase 3 data for the influenza COVID vaccine. And again, this is how they categorized the safety profile. They said it was acceptable tolerability. Acceptable. Okay, so what we're getting from Big Pharma when they tell us about these trials is that they are either encouraging or acceptable. These are not scientific words. These are judgment words based on data that we don't get, right? So given how Pfizer and Moderna actually hid their data, the trial data from the COVID vaccines, we should reject all judgment words like this and say, no, you can't tell me acceptable or tolerable or encouraging. You have to just give me the numbers. That's all we want. right? We will decide based on the numbers what is acceptable and encouraging. You don't get to put value judgments on that, but that's what they're doing. And we just trust them. You would think the media would say, okay, what is encouraging? What is, tell me the numbers and then I'll decide if I'm encouraged by that. You don't get to decide, because acceptable and encouraging is how I feel about it. You don't tell me how to feel. Just tell me the numbers and I'll decide. So the media should ask those questions, but they don't. Here is a rundown of all of the media outlets that just ran with this. That yes, Pfizer is going ahead with a once daily weight loss pill because it was encouraging. But none of these outlets ask what encouraging means. What actually was the safety data? Did these side effects still happen in the once daily dose? None of them. So why is it that none of them ask those questions and they just report things like acceptable and encouraging? You would think that maybe the media was in the pocket for Pfizer.
Oh, yes, they are. And all of the mainstream media is in the pocket for Big Pharma because they are the largest benefactors of these of the money that receives at these networks. So these networks have all of these segments, which of course are sponsored by Pfizer,
yes,
brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Moderna.
Right.
So they're less likely to do critical stories on that. That's just all of these segments. I mean, it's ridiculous how much money Big Pharma has funneled into these media organizations.
Which is so funny because you would think, right? Like it's possible, it is quite possible that the data is encouraging, that if I actually were able to see it, I would find it encouraging. That's possible, but we don't get to see it. We are only fed the conclusion that it's acceptable and encouraging.
Yeah,
show us the data.
If they were to say, you know, like based on these numbers we have, here are the numbers. If you look at this, we find this encouraging. But like, hey, that's how you put that sentence together. But like on the acceptable thing, like, could you imagine putting those words into the mouth of your neurosurgeon before surgery? I think I can do an acceptable job with this brain surgery. I'd be like, I actually would like to find a different neurosurgeon. Thank you.
Yeah. Or how was your night's sleep? How was your night's sleep last night before you're going to operate on my brain? That was acceptable.
Acceptable.
It was acceptable. You know, I had a couple of interruptions in the middle of the night. Dog needed to go out, had diarrhea. I had to take him out in the middle of the night for a couple hours. So I didn't sleep very well, but it's acceptable.
Right. So we should throw out all of these judgment terms as conclusions. That's wrong. We should not even be asked to accept it, but we are being fed it. And it's bonkers. This, again, is dystopic. This should not be in a headline for a reputable media organization, but we just do. And then again, the way CNBC covers it, the way Fox Business covers it is just Pfizer says this is acceptable, and this has been great for their stock because the COVID vaccine's unpopular, so their stock's taken a hit, and this might revive Pfizer's stock. Who the F cares how Pfizer is profiting? We certainly should not, but the media cares. Like, okay, great. This may be Pfizer's next coming of Jesus.
Didn't you see, I think it was Fox Business a few weeks ago had on Albert Bourla.
Yes.
From Pfizer. And they were so effusive about him. Like, oh, we're so thrilled that you're here and all this is great for your stock and look at your stock and look how well everything. It was like a love fest.
Yeah.
I mean, really? That's the critical nature of journalism today is like have this effusive response to these people. The CEO of Pfizer coming on your show.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need to be
I was going to say, based on what all you've said with the side effects and everything, it sounds like it'd be better to just take a laxative every day. I think you'd have less side effects. If you did.
Yeah, you're just crapping the nonstop. That's what it, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So, I mean, think about one of these plaintiffs, her doctor says she has permanent diarrhea now. I mean, no, I don't even want to think about that. That's awful.
That's encouraging.
And
permaria.
Yeah.
That is encouraging. Yeah.
But to the pharmaceutical companies, that is acceptable.
Right. Oh, I mean, this one woman has diarrhea. There's maybe 100 of them out there. We don't know, but we haven't really tested it. So that's acceptable.
Yeah.
She lost weight.
And all the weight they've lost, it's amazing.
She has to wear a diaper now.
Mm-hmm. Right. So again, I think that we should, I don't mean to be overly obsessed with the semantics here, but I am, because we've been through the pandemic. We were lied to repeatedly. And now the media is saying, well, then maybe just don't give us the data, give us the value judgment, and we'll be okay with that. And then we're all off the hook. And I think they should be more on the hook. I am outraged by the use of these words. So let me know if you join me in that. So again, coming up, we're going to talk more about, biopharmaceutical money, the World Health Organization, and how it would benefit them to have us in a permanent state of pandemic. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Tax Network USA, because if you owe back taxes, pandemic relief, of course, is now over. And along with hiring thousands of new agents and field officers, the IRS has kicked off 2024 by sending over 5 million pay-up letters to those who have unfiled tax returns or balances owed. But don't waive your rights and speak to them on your own, because they are not your friend and you could find yourself deeper in the weeds. Find out if Tax Network USA, a trusted tax relief firm, can help you like they have with with thousands of other clients. They've saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they can help you secure the best deal possible. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help you. Whether it's business or personal taxes, they can help you. So give them a call at 1-800-254-6000 for a free consultation, or head on over to tnusa.com/redacted.
Well, how do you create a permanent need for a massive military industrial complex? Well, of course, you create enemies who are not really enemies, but you tell the American people that they're enemies, and you create a war complex, a permanent war on terror, perhaps. When does it ever end? The answer is it doesn't, so you need this massive military industrial complex. Well, how do you create a permanent need for big pharma? Well, you create something similar, just like wars, of course. You create a permanent pandemic market like they're trying to do right now with bird flu and any other disease X they want to throw at you. Journalist Max Jones has just uncovered evidence that the WHO is creating a permanent pandemic marketplace. And he wrote a great piece on unlimitedhangout.com. I'll link it up in the description. I encourage all of you to read it. And journalist Max Jones joins us now. Max, great to have you here on the show.
Thanks for having me, Clayton. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So you really pull back the curtain on this, saying the industry is pursuing the only solution, you write, that's left for their dying model, which is a full takeover of the World Health Organization to capture the global regulatory system. And I think we've been seeing all these pieces coming together, but you really dive deep in this piece. Explain to us what's happening.
Yeah, so basically, every X amount of years, it depends, based on the company and their patents. But Big Pharma faces these things called patent cliffs, because they basically generate most of their profits on these things called blockbuster drugs. And the way that you get a blockbuster drug is by attaining patent exclusivity over it, right? So for X amount of years, no other drug makers can make that drug besides no other drug maker can make that drug besides the developer of it. Right. So basically, when that patent exclusivity ends, pharma companies face a crisis because, say there's a couple graphs in the piece that show how significant these products can be to the companies. But say, a drug is 10 to 30% of the profits that a company generates any given year. When that patent exclusivity ends, the company then faces what it's called a patent cliff. And it's called that because if you think of profits going up and up and up and up because of your patent exclusivity on a drug, the patent cliff is when that all falls down, because now you have generic competitors who are selling the drug at a cheaper price. The drug is almost identical, so it can be interchanged usually in treatments. So if a doctor is prescribing you the non-generic version of a drug, they can, once the generic version comes out, they can say, hey, want to save some money? Use this one instead, right? So Big Pharma is facing a patent cliff right now. Lots of companies in the industry they're facing, I think it's close to $200 billion in losses. And that's kind of normal for pharma, right? But this time it's a bit different because they usually address patent cliffs through mergers and acquisitions. So they'll merge with another pharma company. Like I think in 2009, Pfizer acquired Wyeth, I believe it was called, this other really big pharma company. But the thing is that now, through years of industry consolidation, basically through years of Big Pharma eating itself to stave off the patent cliffs, they become, quote unquote, too big to fail. But now the system that they've become too big to fail within is not really possible for them to operate because they usually do these mergers and acquisitions to hopefully get a new blockbuster drug, right? So you acquire this other company and you hope that you get a new blockbuster drug that you can bring to market. The problem now is that typical chemical-based drugs, which are these, are the drugs that have been used for most of medicine development, right? They're these kind of drugs that are general in the sense that they activate your entire immune system. Now there's been a shift to biotechnology because it's becoming harder to get blockbuster drugs with chemical-based drugs because of a couple reasons. One is there's tighter regulatory constrictions on these drugs. Two, a lot of diseases are already used for these chemical-based drugs, right? So there's kind of now the shift needs to be towards more untreatable things, right? So because one, the regulatory constrictions on chemical-based drugs are going up, and two, lots of chemical-based drugs already exist for these diseases, they're shifting to biotechnology, which unlike chemical-based drugs, these are very specific drugs. So rather than activate your entire immune system, you have something like mRNA, which targets a specific viral protein, and that in the example of mRNA, and then creates more of that protein to fend off the virus, right? The problem with biologics, though, or biotech, is that this specific intention of them makes them really dangerous. They're kind of unpredictable. So like in the case of the COVID vaccine, sometimes it creates too much of that spike protein, and then it leads to issues like myocarditis, for example. Right. Or like in issues of gene editing technology, which is another big market acquisition of pharma in recent years. It might, cut a gene that they don't want you to be there, but then it might activate a gene that's a cancer gene. So now you got cancer because you've done gene editing technology. And basically, they've switched their efforts to biotechnology, but because of the safety issues, it's really hard to succeed with biotechnology and the typical regulatory process. And Whitney Webb documented that really well in her piece called Moderna Hail Mary, I think it's called.
Right.
And long story short, Moderna had no products that had ever gone to market before the COVID-19 pandemic because they were mostly focused on biotechnology-based products, and they could not make it even to human clinical trials because of how dangerous they were and the side effects that they were producing. Well, I was going to say one of the big pieces of what stunned me, and we've been harping on this for quite a while here on the show, is this idea of emergency use authorization for a lot of these drugs, right? That they don't even really go through typical trials, and they get this emergency use authorization, and they're then placed into the marketplace. So how does the emergency use of all of this come into play here? And then I want to talk about the World Health Organization piece of this and the sort of takeover there. But can you explain that part of it? Yeah, so basically, in the context of biotech, right, or pandemic-related products, the emergency use listing or emergency use authorization. Emergency use authorization is the law in the U.S. Emergency use listing is the procedure by the World Health Organization. It basically grants drugs and drug companies this emergency use tag, which allows them to basically skip the clinical trials and the lengthy process of getting a drug approved in the typical regulatory process. And it's an accelerated way to get a drug to market, essentially, that involves massive deregulation. And the reason that the emergency use listing is so vital in the context of biotech and or pandemic related health products is one, because in biotech's case, for example, like I mentioned before with Moderna, these drugs are really dangerous. So they can't really succeed in the typical regulatory process. They can't even make it to human clinical trials a lot of the time. And when they do, they produce serious adverse effects. So, now that Big Pharma has acquired all of these biotechnology companies to stave off the losses that they're going to receive from the coming patent cliff, right? They need a regulatory pathway to get there. And that regulatory pathway appears to be, like in the case of Moderna, massive deregulation, in this emergency deregulation that's initiated under the guise of a pandemic, an emergency, which then allows these products to not go through those trials that usually that holds them back from getting to market, right?
Right.
And then in the context of a pandemic, there's basically one of the initiatives that the World Health Organization international regulations and the World Health Organization CA+ treaty is employing research and development, constant research and development on pathogens with pandemic potential, right? So the idea is that you're already researching and developing medical countermeasures to all of these different viruses that you've surveilled through massive biosurveillance, to develop medical countermeasures for them. And the thing is that once the pandemic that the WHO will declare without the approval of any institutional body, by the way, once the pandemic is declared, they need a countermeasure to it, right? So now, because there's an emergency in place, right, and apparently there's no other treatments for it, they need the emergency use listing, aka the deregulation that allows them to skip all the clinical trials, like we saw with the mRNA COVID vaccines and Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah, it sounds like one big sort of Ponzi scheme, or one big scheme altogether with the World Health Organization. I was led to believe that the World Health Organization is there to protect us, right? It's on our side. It sounds like it's totally been taken over by a big pharma. It's not on our side at all. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right. Basically, the World Health Organization is funded through member state contributions, which are these regular sort of donations that you make if you're a member state to the World Health Organization, and private stakeholders, which are which are basically donations from, they can be government bodies or government institutions, private companies, NGOs.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a big one.
Yeah.
And the thing is that 80% of the funding of the WHO comes from those private stakeholders. And that funding is, unlike the member state contributions, it'll be like, we're funding you to do this certain thing, right? So it comes with more strings attached, that funding. And you can see, if you look at the WHO's advisory boards and also their policies and their committees, that private sector influence has basically infested the organization with all of these ideologues that are pushing their own agendas. Like, just for example, on the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization, the acronym is SAGE for the WHO. 13 of the 15 members, at least from what I found in my own research, currently are from Bill Gates funded NGOs or private stakeholder NGOs, usually funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or coming directly from the Wellcome Trust, which is a whole other thing that we could get into.
How are they able to pull this off? I mean, we cover this here on the show. I know CNN and others don't really talk about this, but it seems like bird flu is like their next big plan. They have the big bird flu summit in October. They're going to talk. They have breakout sessions devoted to public outcry, civil unrest. So Disease X, Dr. Peter McCullough has been talking about bird flu as being perhaps the next big pandemic. But we're calling it out. We're seeing it. So how are they going to be able to pull this off? I mean, this seems to be they're holding on to power, grasping at straws in order to make profits. But we're calling it out. Are they going to be able to sustain this sort of permanent pandemic marketplace? Like every few years, there's going to be a new bird flu. There's going to be a new COVID that we're all going to need to worry about and get these emergency drugs that the government's going to push. Can they pull this off?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I hope not. I have a feeling that it will be a lot harder, because I just know that there's a lot of people that I know personally that felt, myself included, right? Like during the COVID-19 pandemic, I remember when the vaccine came out, I was like, oh, finally we get to end the pandemic and I get to get this vaccine and the virus will stop spreading or whatever. There's a lot of people like me that realized that was all BS basically at the end of the day.
Right.
And I'm not sure if they'll be able to, but I think the thing is that we have to remember is that not every pandemic or public health emergency of international concern, as the World Health Organization refers to it often, will probably be on the same like media scale and panic scale as COVID. So there's still for example, the World Health Organization can kind of just declare a pandemic willy-nilly, the director general. He doesn't need approval of any institutional body. Earlier drafts of the international health regulations actually seek to expand the ways in which you could declare a pandemic of international concern, even though the World Health Organization director general, as of the 2005 international health regulations, can already just, say, hey, we're in a pandemic, and then that's it. But basically, what I'm saying is that even if, say the World Health Organization declares a pandemic for the bird flu, even if that's not getting the same media attention and people aren't, flooding Costco's and all these stores in panic like they were with COVID, they can still then, for example, give Moderna, who's developing a vaccine right now for this bird flu, and on an accelerated path. They basically, the World Health Organization could still give that Moderna emergency use listing and then give it its second product ever and bring it to market, even though maybe not as many people will be taking it as the COVID vaccine. They can still do that, right? So there's still this regulatory pathway for these drugs, even if we're not all riled up like we were during COVID. And I imagine they will try to get us riled up like they did with COVID, at least at some point in the near future.
Yeah, no human trials. Sign me up. Yeah, I'll be your guinea pig for these experimental drugs. This is these biologics, these mRNA vaccines with these spike proteins. It's absolutely disturbing.
And just real quick, on that, like the Wellcome Trust, for example, whose former director was Jeremy Farrar, who is now the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. Whitney Webb documented this in her article on Welcome Leap. They actually are doing this thing to skip human clinical trials where they're trying to use synthetically created or farmed organs to test pandemic products. So like, let's grow an arm and then test the vaccine on the arm or whatever other organ. And then, oh, look, it's safe on this arm that we created. So now it can go straight to human clinical trials or maybe even skip human clinical trials in the face of a very severe emergency. So that just shows you how far this really goes, this process of deregulation and accelerated pandemic health product development.
Imagine being the janitor, not knowing what's happening in that facility, and you stumble in one night. You see a bunch of arms being grown so they can do clinical trials on fake human arms. Like, this is where we are right now. It's crazy. Thank you for your amazing journalism on this, Max. I encourage everyone to read this, and you can dive more deeply into all the details. You can see the graphs and all of the data that Max has here. Go to unlimitedhangout.com. We'll have it linked up in the description below as well. Max, keep up the great work. Thanks so much for joining us for the first time on Redacted.
Of course, Clayton, you too.
So thanks so much, Max. We really appreciate it. And how many of you guys are going to be watching the big press conference, the Biden press conference this afternoon, the NATO press conference? We'll have to see how well that goes. I'll be dialing it in, of course, and we'll be watching it very, very closely. Hey, I should mention before we go, we have our Redacted store. If you'd like to support independent journalism, we are supported by you guys and a few sponsors that we have here on the show. So we do not take money from Big Pharma or any of the big tech companies or anything like that. We are just supported by you guys. So if you come over to redactedstore.com, you can pick up some great merch. We've got some great new designs that have just landed on the store. So go check them out. Our Do Not Comply t-shirts. I love our anti-conspiracy, our conspiracy knower t-shirts. Go check that out in the store as well. And so great to see all of you guys out there in public. Share your pictures on Twitter if you want to. Post it and make sure that you @reply our Redacted Twitter handle on. We'll share some of your photos here on the show as well. So redactedstore.com is the place to go to check it out. So guys, thanks so much for joining us here in our week here, the first week in our new studio as we were dialing everything in. We really appreciate all the feedback and the kind words and the patience as we worked out some of the gremlins and tech issues here. But that's what it's all about. So thank you guys so much for that. We'll be back here on Monday, of course, with our next live show. And we've got some great content for you throughout the weekend as well. So have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll see you back here on Monday.